Hey, everybody, this is Eric Mishi, Executive Director of SAVE, Suicide Awareness Voices of Education. Another conversation that we're having during this entire week of Suicide Awareness Prevention Week, during Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. Had some great conversations. Just got done speaking with Deb Stone with the Centers for Disease Control to talk about the national strategy for suicide prevention. Before that, we had a conversation with the CEO of the Trevor Project, James Black. And now I am thrilled to be joined by Kim Burditt or Kim Burdett. I'm going to get it I'm going to figure out which one I'm going to go with there at some point here, Kim, who is with Stop Soldier Suicide. And Kim, welcome and thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Eric. I'm so happy to be here. This is a great week of conversations and topics, much needed. So
and I'm grateful to some friends of ours who were the ones who told us about the important work that you're doing. And so before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about you, a little bit about your background and kind of your professional experience here.
Sure. Thank you for that. My professional experience really springs from a personal experience. So I am a loss survivor myself. My brother was a Marine Corps veteran and he died by suicide in April of 2010. And it was shortly thereafter that I knew I wanted to do something with this, and this being suicide. It was not my prior background at all, nor my education. But I knew that I just felt led. I felt drawn. I needed to do something. I was able to, through various volunteer positions first, and then a part-time position in the state that I was living in, which was Massachusetts at the time. And then was able to work part-time, and then able to start working full-time in the field. And specifically the work that I was initially doing was trainings, but then also suicide loss survivor peer support. And I was doing it for a national organization many people have heard of called TAPS, the Tragedy Assistance Program Survivors, that supports military and veteran families. And I worked specifically for almost 10 years with those military veteran families who had lost their loved one to suicide, and really was able to be fortunate to be exposed to so much in the suicide prevention field and intervention and postvention, and really was able to build my sort of professional foundation there. I did go back to school and I got a social work degree. I'm not licensed. I'm not a clinician. That's not the kind of social work that I knew that I wanted to practice. But I do feel drawn to, the sort of the grief journey after a suicide occurs. And so supporting those family members in any way that is that feels right for them and feels good for them. And specifically in the areas of post-traumatic growth after loss, because I feel that I have been, right place, right time. And also by the grace of God that I was able to make some good decisions along the way and be exposed to, some of the greats in the field of suicide prevention, in the field of grief, and really just sponge in as much as I could. And to be able to do all of this in honor of my brother, in honor of my family story, and, in honor of all those that struggle and that we lose to suicide. So that's the quick version, the elevator version of my story of the past, almost 15 years. So
15 years. Well, first of all, thank you for the work that you're doing. Sorry for your loss of your brother. And earlier today, we had a gentleman on who works in the area of PTSD for military veterans, particularly focused on suicide prevention there. And clearly this community, our military veterans, are ones that are increasingly at risk despite all of the resources that we provide to them. And as you look at the past 15 years, Kim, in the work that you've been doing, where do you see there has been the most progress, generally speaking? And where do you see that there's still critical gaps that need to be addressed?
I think, in the past 15 years, and again, so much of that experience it stemmed from sort of my personal lens. So, from that perspective, it does seem that we are talking about suicide more. We are, we're much more open. We are, yes, I work in the field, so I see it, but I try to notice it, sort of outside of my normal purview, to get a gauge of, are we really being more open about it? And I think that we are. And I think that that's definitely indicative of progress. I think that, and this will link later to when we're talking about the project that I'm working on at Stop Soldier Suicide. But I think that we need to be open to other approaches. There is no one size fits all approach to someone who is struggling, with their mental health or struggling with whatever it might be for them. There's no one approach. There's no one way to tackle this. And I think that, to be able to be open to looking at it from different sides of it, it's a multifaceted Rubik's Cube, I guess. And, to be able to want to collaborate and put, okay, so I've got information about this type of approach. How can we merge and collaborate that with this so that we can reach the most people at the right time before that, that critical point of no return. And I think there's lots of room there. I don't know that addressing the problem of not even suicide in our country in general, but even for particular populations, the military veteran one that I happen to work in. I don't know that, a clinical approach is scalable to meet the need, to really actually address, if that's our only approach, right? And, and that approach doesn't work for everyone. We know, again, there's no one magic thing. So I think we've got to be open to new things. We've got to be open to, new approaches and new ways to work together to really make a much deeper impact. So.
Yeah. And I got to tell you, I am delighted to hear that perspective. So, I've been in this role for a little over a year. I've been in the nonprofit world for about the same amount of time that you have been. And, I think this idea of having folks that are constructively disruptive in these conversations, right? Who are not afraid to say, we've got to look at this different, right? We've got to recognize that we've made a lot of progress. We've made a lot of good impact, but there's clearly something that we're still not quite getting right as often as we should. And so taking the perspective that looking at things differently, being willing to be disruptive, be willing to take risks, be willing to accept that, yes, there are experts out here, there is research out here, but there's also some unknowns. And unless we are willing to try those types of approaches, we're never going to find out whether or not there's a chance of success for them. So I'm delighted to hear your thoughts on that. And so before we get to the specific project you're working on, share with us a little bit more about Stop Soldier Suicide as an organization as a whole.
Sure. So Stop Soldier Suicide, and we also call it SSS because the full name is a mouthful, right? Was founded in 2010, actually, by 3 Army veterans who, quite frankly, they had returned home from their deployments and their, two out of the 3 would tell the story that they were, safely returned home with their units and then started losing brothers and sisters here at home to suicide. And they got fed up and they really were, we've got to do something. So that really was the sort of the very beginning. But founded by 3 Army vets, which is why the word soldier is in our name. However, we do serve, the service that we provide is for anyone who has ever served in any branch of the military. I want to make sure that I'm clear about that. But what sets us apart as an organization that serves veterans and active duty service members is we provide suicide specific care. We are the only national nonprofit that is solely focused on solving the issue of suicide among U.S. veterans and service members. And what that means is that our clinical side of the house, the service that we provide, is clinical treatment, is telemental health care to, again, anyone who has ever served or is currently serving, regardless of discharge status, regardless of time served, regardless of how long ago it was, regardless of if they were, were in combat or in theater or not, or none of that matters. We are a standalone nonprofit, so it's always confidential, the treatment that our clients receive. We are separate from any other, the government or DOD or VA. So no reporting ever goes back, regarding care and treatment that our folks receive. Our clinicians, we can serve all 50 states. Again, it's free, it's confidential, it's all telemental health, but it's suicide specific. We will help connect our clients to, if they need treatment for PTSD or, a substance use issue or, other things such as support around homelessness or food insecurity. We can definitely, provide those wraparound connections to, resources in their community and maybe even beyond. But our treatment is specific to those who are moderate to high risk for suicide. And our clinicians are, they use sort of a collection of evidence-based tools that are specific, designed specifically for suicide risk determination, and then suicide prevention and suicide intervention. So things we use are like CASE, which is the chronological assessment of suicidal events, crisis response planning, something called CAMS, which is the collaborative assessment and management of suicidality, brief cognitive behavioral therapy specific for suicide prevention. So again, it's specific to that. And most of our folks they see us between 6 and 10 sessions, but sometimes it goes a little bit longer. And if they need us longer, we're with them for longer. So, we're having great results with that. I mean, I would never say, I don't think we could ever say we've saved X amount of lives, because I don't think that's ever, we can ever sort of pinpoint that. But our clients give us incredible feedback that we're really proud, that we have made such an impact in their lives and helped them to keep themselves alive, right? We as an organization are we are driven to make sure that what we're doing is working. And that means we are very data focused. We track and monitor everything that we do, which is some kind of sort of linked to the nexus of the Black Box Project. So with that that approach to data matters, and we've got to make sure that we're mindful of the data and tracking the data so we know what we're doing, and if because how else are we going to improve it, right? How else can we ensure that what we're doing is the right thing and find those places where we can improve it? Along with that perspective that you talked about, Eric, of like, we've got to try something. Can we look at this in a different way, even if it's a little scary or unknown or risky or no one's done it before? Like, how else can we attack this problem? That's where the idea for the Black Box Project came from.
Yeah.
So if you think about we all know what a black box in aviation is, what a black box does after an airplane accident. If you take that concept and overlay it instead to a personal digital device, meaning a cell phone, a tablet, and even a laptop, we are in the Black Box Project, we are borrowing those personal devices from family members who have lost a service member or veteran to suicide. Again, that black box in an airplane accident tells you what happened the seconds, minutes, hours, sometimes days, weeks, and months before that happened. And the idea of that is like, okay, so we get a snapshot of what happened so that we can make sure that doesn't happen again, right? In a real sort of general sense. We believe that through these digital devices, we're going to hopefully learn some new things, learn some things about, how people behave digitally in their digital life, right? And we understand that's one piece of someone's entire, the entire puzzle that is a person, right? Their digital behavior, what they are doing on their phone, how they're communicating, what they're looking at, what their schedule, their calendar says, the places that they go, how often their device is active. We believe that that is going to provide some information. It's going to give us maybe some understandings that and some insight that maybe we don't have right now. Maybe it's just going to confirm some things that we already know in the field. Maybe it's going to illuminate some places that we can build new interventions, knowing that, behavior that on a cell phone that is X, Y, and Z is indicative of heightened risk. Maybe now, we as a field or we as an organization will build to create those interventions. The project is relatively new. We're still under 3 years old, and it is an internal initiative. It's a data analysis project essentially, but it's got a heart behind it because we know to do this, we've got to engage with loss survivors. I have been at SSS coming up on 1.5 years now, and it was so impressive to me when they brought me on that they knew they needed a loss survivor in this position.
Yeah.
Not because it's me, but because I can share that and, with another, when I'm explaining the project to a family, to explore with them if it's something that they want to participate in, it's helpful that they know someone, that who they're talking to at least has an understanding of the weightiness of this ask. We know it's a big ask. And we have, we've sort of proven proof of concept, so to speak, because we've engaged with just short of 200 families who have loaned us just over 100 devices and since the beginning of the project. And we are beginning the analysis of all that data. I should add, it's very important to know that data when we I'm picking up my phone, but it's plugged in.
Yep.
When we borrow a device from a family member, we are essentially taking a snapshot of the data that lives on that phone. It does not get connected to the internet. We don't log into apps. So we copy the data that lives on there because all devices like that have little hard drives that save a lot of things. And we depersonalize and de-identify that data immediately, and it gets pooled into a larger data set, and that's where the analysis happens. We don't create, and we're not ever going to seek to create a report of any one individual device that says this is what we saw, this is what it indicates heightened risk for suicide. Or that's not really the power of this project. That the power is when we pool the data and we see those behavioral trends and patterns, that in X amount of devices that we analyzed, ABC happened in the last 3 weeks before the person died. Well, that can show some commonalities, that can illuminate, like I said, maybe some insights that we didn't know, and then that can lead to some places that we could build interventions. So my role, as I said, is to engage with the families and to, just share the project with, anyone that is interested in it. And then we explore if it's something that they want to participate in. We have a team of digital forensic experts that have a background in sort of criminal evidence through law enforcement. And so we've got a digital forensics lab, and we have all of the software and hardware that, some of the government agencies have. It's been donated to us to be able to do this. So a common question is, if a device is locked, can we unlock it to get access and then give it back to the family unlocked? And the answer is usually, but not every time. It's just not an exact science. There's a lot of variables in security on phones. And so usually we can do that, but not every single time. That can be really hopeful for a family if they want to get access to a device that, there could be pictures and videos in there that they, haven't had access to before. So my absolute favorite part or piece, I think, of the project is that, and this is, this links right back to, my personal grief journey and my connection, is that this feels like a tiny little piece of post-traumatic growth, because being able to find and make meaning and purpose in what feels like a very purposeless loss, right? Most suicide loss survivors that I've worked with would say, you know what, if I can do something that is going to hopefully, potentially save another family from experiencing what mine did, absolutely, absolutely. How can I help? And it does. It gives a little bit of, meaning and purpose, and, to be able to honor your loved one with this effort to save, to save another veteran or save a service member.
So I think this is incredibly fascinating. And I'm going to come back to some additional thoughts in a second here. But so you've explained some of the questions I was going to have. You already answered them, right? About how do you unlock the phone, that you depersonalize the data, so you're not looking specifically at an individual, so that information at least connected to an individual with a name and a face, right? And this just in the data-driven element of this. So as you are looking, when you talk about looking at the data, what is it you're trying to capture in your assessment and evaluation of this data?
So we're looking for trends, right? We're looking for anything that is going to show a pattern, right? So things like, I'll give you an example, phone activity. If, we have this pool of data, and if the majority of that data shows that these devices in the last week of phone activity before the persons died, the phones were active 21 hours out of 24, that person's not sleeping, right? Now, that's not revolutionary. We know, that people who are struggling perhaps are really, they struggle to get good sleep. But that could illuminate places where we could build an intervention, or go out and find those individuals who are struggling. Now, SSS, in our sort of marketing approach, we already do a little bit of that. In the gaming world, if people are, we want to go and find people who are struggling, our service members and our veterans, and not wait for them to call us. So in the gaming world, you know how you see ads, if you ever played online games, little ads pop up. We time our ads to, ideally, again, if black box data shows there are people up and they're in the middle of the night, they're not sleeping, well, then that could be a good time for us to spend a little more money and put some ads there where we can reach out to those who are struggling and get in front of them. So, but we're looking at, like I said, activity. We are looking at outgoing communication, such as texts and emails. And we've analyzed that. We're at the very beginning process of that, but looking at sentiment, right? So, you can't judge, someone's emotion or understand what they're feeling by, an emoji or anything like that. But, if you look at sentiment and maybe changes in sentiment over time, that could be indicative of a change, right? Maybe a change in that person's outlook, a change in that person's, self-depreciating language is something we were looking at. And where this could go, and I don't know that this is something that we would do or wouldn't do in the future. Honestly, this could be future state. Excuse me. But we provide telemental health to our clients as it is. What if someday, and this is my personal musings, this is not organizational. We haven't worked this out yet, but I think about what if someday we create an app where we're engaging with our clients over that app, right? And with their full understanding and their full consent, they engage with us through that app. And that app is on their device. And maybe I don't want to use the word track or monitor, but that's maybe kind of what it does. Some sort of high level things, nothing really, too detailed, but maybe that app would track that phone activity. And if I'm a clinician with Stop Soldier Suicide and I'm treating, John Smith, and he's engaging with me on this app, and his phone reports back to me that it's been active 4 out of the last 5 nights, and I don't have an appointment with him till next week, I'm going to reach out earlier because I can see, that's just sort of a real world that I think, a potential. Again, this is not something that, we're intent on building quite yet, if we even go that route, but we just know that there can be gold in this data. And that, we want to find it and find out, how to best utilize it.
The Craig Bryan, who was a military doctor, wrote a book Rethinking Suicide.
Yep.
Fascinating book because, again, he comes at this issue from the standpoint of saying, we need to rethink not only kind of suicide prevention, we also need to rethink some of the data that we derive from things like psychological autopsies, right? That psychological autopsy is a fairly limiting process because you're not talking to the individual who died by suicide, right? You're talking to the universe of people around that individual who very often, as time goes on, have different assessments and evaluations of what may have been some of the predictive factors, if you will, around someone's suicide. Not particularly reliable, although heartfelt and things like that. But it's a lot of that, as I think about it 3 months later, they didn't return my phone call that one night or things like that.
And it's filtered through a human, right? And humans, through a personal relationship, we're biased, that's one of the things that, this is almost first person report, right? This is almost, the data in that phone, the data in those devices is provided by the individual. So that's, one unique aspect of this data set.
Yeah. And that's the part that, again, I find fascinating about this because, here at SAVE, we have for many, many years, we have this program called the Named Memorial, which essentially it's a wall that has the names of those who died by suicide. Very important, very meaningful for suicide loss survivors. But one of the things that I find very limiting about that is that we never really truly know who that person is, what their life was like, what may have been the precipitating factors that put them in a crisis that led them to a situation where they died by suicide. And in a lot of ways, if you could hear that person talk to you and tell you what happened in the way that you're talking about here, through their phone, through an electronic device, given that so much of our lives today are built around that tool, if you will. I think what you're doing is extraordinarily important and hopeful, in that it can provide us some information and hopefully exponentially create a much larger understanding of what are the things that lead people to this place where they die by suicide. So what's your next step in this process?
Well, we are still in the data collection stage, the need for more data. We've amassed, like I said, a pretty good sized data set. We know that, there's going to be so much more statistical strength and significance in the larger our data set, the better. So that is, again, my primary function. And without devices, there's no black box project, there's no data. So, to work with these families, we've created a black box project ambassador council of some of our families who have loaned us devices that are out there doing suicide prevention and intervention work in their home communities. And so that we can, share resources with them and elevate their work and, support them. And, but, we really want to, we don't want this to be transactional with a family unless they wanted to. It's okay. If they do, that's fine. But, we really want to build that connection with them, to have them, feel supported by us and support our work too, and share about the Black Box Project. So, other families who may want to engage would have that opportunity. So that's really my role right now. I'm trying to tell this story to whomever will listen. And, and again, it is innovative and it's really unique. And, people sort of get, kind of like, oh, when the light bulb goes on and they're like, oh, and this, the applications beyond this population, I think is it's incredible, and the potential. But I always, we know there's a person every single, it's a very personal thing. Someone's cell phone this is very, very personal. There are people behind this, and we make sure that our families know, this is how we approach it. And this is a really unique way to honor them.
Well, Kim, consider SAVE one of your ambassadors here to help spread the word here about this project and program. And I'm going to follow up next week and learn some more from what you're doing and see what we can do to help amplify this. I think what you're doing, it is innovative. It's all those things, but it's also something, again, that is kind of pushing the boundaries of what we've done in the past. And I think that's important. And I want to thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for making time to share that with us and everybody else here today.
Thanks
and
for having me. This was great.
Well, we look forward to continuing to stay in touch, and I'll reach out. Look forward to talking to you some more.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Eric. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.